then we will stop recording. All right, here we go. So this project is called Rewild Vermont, and the vision is a big one: to transform how people in Vermont relate to the land toward regenerative, just practices. In this project, we want to work toward climate justice, food justice, economic justice, migrant justice, and more through planting trees, education, and advocacy. And climate change is a complex issue that intersects with so many other issues like racial justice and economic justice and indigenous sovereignty and food justice and many more. And we want to work for solutions that address multiple intersecting systems of oppression. And working for solutions also presents this wonderful opportunity to build the world we want to live in. And that's through, in this project, planting trees that will sequester carbon and contribute to ecosystem health and feed people, but also really build community and practice nurturing relationships in the ways that we believe in. And this project is part of 350 Vermont's Put Carbon in the Ground Solutions campaign. Next slide, please. We are starting this project with a workshop series this summer and continuing next summer, focused on connections between climate justice, food justice, migrant justice, and other related issues. And some of those dates are coming up in the next several weeks. So we hope you will join us for some rich discussion, and please encourage people in your groups and communities to join these online workshops. Next slide, please. And then the part of the project that we are hoping you all will launch into very soon is starting to organize planting a lot of trees to feed people and trees to grow forests. And we're setting a very ambitious goal of 100,000 trees statewide in the next 2 years. And especially getting started, we're really envisioning this as being led by nodes with support from staff. In the fall and winter, our staff will be able to do a lot more kind of centralized helping to get large quantities of trees and fundraising. But to start with, we're really seeing this as a very local effort that has the opportunity to involve a lot of different possible partners and new volunteers. We're hoping that a large proportion of the trees planted will be fruit and nut trees, not only to sequester carbon, but also to provide food, and to plant these in places that will be accessible to people experiencing food insecurity, potentially getting some community orchards started. And then also really organizing with groups in your area, like greening groups, to arrange for future harvests to end up in places to address food insecurity, for instance, food shelves. And then along with lots of fruit and nut trees, we're hoping for the planting of many native trees to really contribute to ecosystem health along with sequestering carbon. And we all know that in Vermont, trees grow where they're allowed to do so. And so we want to encourage prioritizing, choosing places to plant where reforestation wouldn't be happening and where it wouldn't be allowed to be happening on its own. Next slide, please. And advocacy is the third part of this project. And to start with, we want to encourage local organizing groups while you are working on organizing tree planting, to be also engaging your municipalities and institutions in your local areas to improve their land care practices toward regenerative ones, and organizing to pass ordinances for regenerative practices if needed. And then beginning in the fall, we will start exploring together what kinds of advocacy we could organize on a statewide level to support regenerative food growing practices, fair payment for people who are growing food, and other aspects of these interconnected issues. And now we will hear from Jael about some more details.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to see you all. And it was really great to hear about all the regenerative ag gardening projects that are happening, the composting, the community gardens. I'm really pleased. I wasn't aware that so much was happening, so it's really great that people are actually doing things around this campaign. So I'm just going to walk everyone through the kind of nuts and bolts of this project. So step one, groups meet. Start planning out fall projects. We encourage groups to plant, like Lily said, 1,000 trees this fall. And we're hoping that nodes will focus on this for the next few months. I know you have a lot of other things going on, but maybe this is a good way to recruit new members. Groups will need to find locations, where to source trees, and fundraise to purchase trees for this fall. We have created a toolkit which lists all kinds of great information. And I'm not going to go into this toolkit too in depth, but you can, we will share this link with you and you can explore it at your leisure. And, you know, always reach out if you have questions. So once your groups meet and you draft a plan, then we encourage you to reach out to town officials, conservation commissions, institutions, schools, tree boards, and churches to find locations and also to source funding. So contact your Department of Public Works and tree boards and see if they can help you, guide you in locations to plant trees. Also connect with nonprofits and, like I said, schools and other institutions and businesses that have, you know, some lawn that maybe you could plant a few trees on. So when you're finding locations, remember to emphasize choosing places where trees wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to grow. You know, always along riverbanks to help create buffers and help prevent erosion is a good location. And remember that if trees are being planted on private land, and if you're planting fruit trees especially, that make sure that the public can access the fruit and nuts from these trees, or that there's a plan in place for the fruit to be collected and given out to those in need. So in the toolkit, we have a whole list of places where you can find and source trees, nurseries, NRCS, conservation districts. Groups can dig up crowded out saplings to plant. So I know on my land, there's a lot of saplings that get crowded out. And so you can find someone who has a similar situation and dig out those saplings and move them to a new location. Just be careful that you're not planting or moving invasive species. Norway maples are an invasive species. So before you go dig up a bunch of maples, make sure it's not a Norway maple. Fruit trees will need to be planted in a more alkaline soil, where like blueberries will need to be planted in a more acidic soil. So I recommend getting soil tests done in those locations and making sure that your pH is correct for like apple trees or blueberries, and then adding amendments like lime or sulfur if need be. To sourcing funding for this fall, reach out to local businesses for sponsorship, do local fundraisers, ask friends with means. There might be some local grants out there. It sounds like Earth Matters was able to get a local grant. So if you need help applying for those, let us know and we can offer some assistance. And again, like Lily said, staff will be working on fundraising and applying for grants this winter and securing bare roots for spring of 2021. So once you get all these things figured out, the next thing is to promote the projects and, write letters to the editors, put up flyers, and we will have a flyer to pass out to share with folks. And then use this opportunity to bring in more people to the movement. And then the next important piece is to track the projects. So I've put together this rough spreadsheet that you can use, and I don't know if you all can see it here, it's kind of small, but basically you need some sort of document to use to make sure that there's good communication. So the first column is location and address of where the trees are planted. So if it's on a person's private land, have that address listed, or if it's like on the Unitarian Church in Chester's lawn or front yard, put that location there. How many trees were planted, who's doing the planting, who will care for the trees and harvest the fruits. So once the trees are planted, folks need to take care of them for a year or so until they really get established. So you can't just stick them in the ground and then walk away. They're going to need to be weeded around and watered. And so it's good to have a list of who's going to be doing that. A date the trees were planted, and then dates when they were watered or fertilized or pruned. Important contact information like the landowner's contact information or people who are running the project, and then notes. So this is just a rough example of some sort of tracking doc that you all can create. And again, I want to encourage you all to join the workshops that we're offering this summer. We're going to have lots of farmers talking about farming in these times with climate change and how we can transition our food system to make it more just. And I also want to remind you all that we're really trying to make systemic change here. So using this opportunity to change the way that land is cared in your town. So, and to do that, you may need to pass an ordinance. You may need to pass an ordinance banning pesticides and herbicides from being used in your town. So, learning more about what your town does to care for the property around town and how that needs to change. I really recommend you all work on that. And I know there's a lot of towns that aren't meeting or having just virtual meetings, but I would recommend checking into those land care practices now if you can. And then this fall, we will gather to discuss strategy around how to really change our food system to make it more regenerative and to really store carbon. And, we don't know, we want to discuss how we're going to do this. Are we going to try and have some sort of regenerative ag component as part of the Green New Deal and work to pass the Green New Deal? Are we going to work to pass a soil health bill? Or payment for ecosystem services bill, which is basically would pay farmers to sequester carbon, to change their practices so that they store carbon rather than burn it, and then we pay them for that transition. Or do we want to skip legislation altogether and just focus on policies within state agencies or within our towns? So those are some of the other things we're going to be working on this fall. And that's my spiel.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
So the Climate Advocates Bennington now has been getting started on a big tree planting project, and we're going to have plenty of time for some questions, but before we go into questions, we want to invite Barbara from Bennington to share a little bit about Climate Advocates Bennington's project and their experiences and what they've been learning so far.
So this has been a pretty steep learning curve. We should have had Jael's toolkit a year ago when we first started this. I got the idea of planting trees from the book Drawdown, and read sort of extensively on reforestation. And we decided to not just plant trees, but to plant forests. And so first off, we decided we're not going to plant single trees in the lawn of the local church or in somebody's backyard. We're going to plant groups of trees. And we also decided that we weren't going to plant on private property, that we were only going to plant on property that was held in common in some way. So we've been poking around at things, reading a lot, talking to a lot of people, and there is just a lot of professional support out there in our governments. I would urge you to take advantage of your conservation districts, your extension agents, your town foresters. Every county has a forester, and those people have been super helpful. We started out thinking that we were going to have a booth at Mayfest in May, and we were going to have all of these fancy things for kids, games for kids, and that we would give out seedlings. But of course that didn't happen because of COVID. And we kind of just backed off all of our plans. We had been planning, we'd been working with several groups. In particular, we were working with a sustainability teacher at the local middle school, Mount Anthony Union Middle School. And Mount Anthony Middle School has a land agent, a land steward is what they call him. And the sustainability teacher and this land steward were working together on a food forest. So we began to plan with them to plant a food forest, and a food forest, sort of a permaculture kind of idea where you have the various layers of trees and a mix of trees and nut trees along with the other hardwoods. But then plant under that fruit shrubs, blackberries, raspberries, gooseberries under that, and then under that perennial vegetables. And the reason that we're doing that is because the one of the supervisory union officials is in particular interested in feeding students. So we're really excited about that possibility. The other thing that we have going is we're going to plant an orchard in Howard Park in Shaftesbury. And that will be 1/4 of an acre of probably mixed fruits. We talked to them about a food forest, but you know, part of the problem with planting trees is people want to mow around them. And if you plant a food forest, nobody knows how to take care of it. So working with them, we decided we'd just plant an orchard, and then it's in a park. So it would be available, the fruit would be available to whoever wanted to come and pick it. We're going to do a planting at the Veterans Home. And this is one of the reasons why we really got stalled out, because the Veterans Home just closed down completely, irrevocably. Nobody can come on the property at all. And so that plan is still on, but we're going gradual, and we may be able to do that in the fall. We were fortunate that a place called Whipstock Hill is a wildlife management area, and it had been deforested and mined. And so they're trying to reforest at that site. So we've got those projects going on. And then we learned a lot about soil pH and growth of trees and what trees go where. And what we really decided, what I would urge you to do is find the land that you're going to plant on first. That's the first step, because then you can ascertain what kind of soil you've got and whether or not it's wet soil or dry soil. And then that makes choosing trees easier. You can choose trees that will grow well in those particular areas. We found several places that nurseries that have trees for exactly these kinds of projects. I'm sure Jael has them in her toolkit, but just to sort of give you a clue about how much money we're talking about, you can get, and these are seedlings, like was on Jael's slide. They're not in a pot, they're not balled, they're just like maybe 5 inches. You can get 30 plants for $30, or 100 plants for $60, depending on what sorts of plants you want. So at a seedling level, they're really, really affordable. We're going to do some plantings at the vet center and at a historical site in the fall. We're hoping that we can do it in the fall. And those will have to be either potted trees or balled trees. And those will be more expensive and harder to plant, because you have to have an auger or some mechanism to dig the hole big enough to plant the tree. The seedlings we will plant in Whipstock Hill, and those seedlings we will not take care of. We will put them in the ground. We will come back next year and figure out how many of them have been eaten by the deer or the rabbits or whatever, and do another planting. The ones that are the bigger trees, the balled or potted trees, we have put them in spots and have guarantees from the people who own those spots that they will take care of the trees. So they'll make sure that they're watered, pruned, whatever needs to be done to them. Organizing is really a big deal. In terms of our outreach, it's really been remarkable. We haven't found anyone yet that doesn't love a tree. You know, everybody loves a tree. Everybody wants to plant a tree. Everybody wants to take care of a tree. And so that's been really encouraging. And what we've decided is that our node is not going to plant all the trees, but we're reaching out to a whole variety of community groups, the Rotary, Boy Scouts, Master Gardeners, those sorts of organizations, and working with them so that they can plant some of the trees. So that's a really important piece to get your message out, to recruit volunteers, to get more trees planted.
So, Barbara, I'm so sorry, we're running short on time. Are there
just one more thing? We've raised $11,000 simply by asking people to donate. So that's totally doable. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you so much. It's really great hearing about Climate Advocates Bennington's experiences so far, and really valuable to hear what you all have been learning. Thank you for sharing. And now we want to move into just some time for questions, and want to reiterate the invitation to put an asterisk in the chat if you want to say something, or raise your hand. I think I saw that Melody had a question, is that right? No, okay. Marcy.
So I have a question about invasive species. We have woods behind our house, for instance, and I just feel like they're crowding out trees, and it means cutting down trees, invasive trees. Is there a feeling about that?
We actually could have an hours-long conversation on this specific topic, which I want to invite there to be space for, but I really want to use this time to focus on this tree planting project. Just knowing the time is so limited, I'm sorry.
Can I just say, if anybody needs to talk about invasive species, I'm an expert on that, unfortunately. So you can call me.
Okay.
Hey, thank you, Cheryl Joy.
One of the things that I do know about invasive species is you have to be careful in terms of thinking about you're going to plant trees in a vacant lot. Getting rid of invasive vines or shrubs is an intensive, difficult task. And so you probably want to consider that very carefully.
Lily, did you get my email about the diverse mini forests that I forwarded?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'll have to look.
Okay, I don't have the link for it. Rod Monroe brought up the subject on the Facebook group page, and it was basically talking about native trees, diverse trees in a small space, kind of crowded together, which I was surprised about. And I think it's a Japanese way of agriculture. And it's encouraging wildlife and birds back to the areas. It sounded intriguing. I'll see if I can find it and forward it.
We can add that to the toolkit.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Is there a, it seems like, well, is there in the toolkit of like a form letter almost, since the first order of business is to find the land? So to send out to towns like, do you have land that we could plant trees on or something, so that we could not reinvent the wheel every time?
That's a good idea, Marcy. We could put something in there. Like there's a flyer that you can hand out to people that's being drafted at this moment, and send to your town officials. But we could also kind of have a draft letter, example of a draft letter in the toolkit as well.
And I would say call your town forester or your county forester. They know the forest lands upside and downside, and they know where the tree planting is going. Call them.
Can I make a comment here?
Yeah, Cheryl, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of, we're trying in Vermont and really the whole Northeast and really everywhere to make habitat connectivity. And that has to do with forests being more connected and stop the parcelization, stop them from being separated from each other. So a lot of times planning commissions, hopefully, and regional planning commissions are looking at spots that they really want to have be more connections. And you need to have a forest put back in order to do connections. And riparian buffers are one of the ways to do the connections. But if you talk to the planning commissions in your town or the regional planning commissions for your regional area, then hopefully they're also working with different people that are doing habitat connectivity. You can talk to actually, I guess it's Fish and Wildlife doing that, working on that stuff as well. To find the really good places that it's so important to connect habitat, to connect forests. And I did put it in the chat, but I feel like I really need to say it out loud, is that one big thing is to stop the splitting up of forests. Even more important, I think, than planting trees is to stop them the forests being split apart from each other. Stop roads, stop buying little bits of property in the forests and that kind of thing. So I could talk for a long time on that stuff, but I'll just leave it there. Thanks for letting me say it.
Well, thank you everyone for the questions and insights so far. And we are leaving some more time a little bit later to take more questions that are going to arise. But we want to spend some time in smaller groups again, discussing how we're gonna do this work together. And Sonia, do you want to share the screen again? Thank you. So what we're going to spend the next little while talking about is why is this project important, and how in doing this project can we center justice, build community, and make it as impactful as possible. And we want to invite you to use the 4 R's of change making as a framework for thinking about this. Many of you have been in workshops where we've discussed the 4 R's, which are for all necessary aspects and different approaches to change making. And those are reimagine, which is about envisioning new systems; recreate, which is about building new systems; resist, which is about confronting systems; and reform, which is about working within systems. So kind of using those different concepts of change making as a framework. Why is this project important, and how can we center justice, build community, and make this project as impactful as possible? And in the slideshow, let's share the slideshow. And we have a slide for each group to put ideas on these sticky notes and move them around into these different quadrants of change making. And just want to acknowledge there are many other ways of conceiving of change making too, but this is one that we often use at 350 Vermont. So just make sure there's at least one person in your group who's able to edit those slides And when we come back together, we're going to spend some time looking at the ideas from each group. So if you can find a way to make clear at the end of your 20 minutes or so which are your group's favorite ideas. Maybe you can put them in bold or in capital letters or something, but maybe one idea in each quadrant or somewhere in that ballpark of number of ideas to particularly draw people's attention to that. Are there any clarifying questions before we go into breakouts? All right. Well, let's spend some time in these group discussions and come back together just after 5:25.
I should do a 20-minute timer, Lily?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, great.
Or 18 or 19 minutes.
All right, get ready to teleport.